A couple great questions from Joshua. I'm so excited for these questions.
All right.
Is universal suffrage a bad thing because it brings about mob rule, or is it bad because voting is always rigged and merely used as a smokescreen to legitimize the decisions of powerful elites without their having to take responsibility for those decisions? In other words, is voting more of a servant of the unbridled passions of the masses or a cunning tool for manipulation by the few? Are elections bad because they're real, or are they bad because they're fake? I often hear both these reasons offered by critics of democracy, but they seem to be contradictory. Mm.
Well, firstly, I think universal suffering is terrible. I'm not in favor of local suffering. In fact, I'm not even in favor of individual suffering. So
Suffrage.
universals. Oh, I knew that. I mean, like voting.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not that different from suffering, like the last presidential election. Anyway, well, to answer the question then in these radically reformed terms, uh, actually both are right. I know that sounds contradictory, but the reason I say both are right is that on the one hand, the elites use the passions and greed of the mob to lure them out to vote ignorantly, but to do so in terms of what the elite want. And they basically they promise them the moon and the stars and they'll vote for them, and then they don't give it to them. The bait and switch. Uh, there are a lot of tactics like this. I mean, one of the most common in places like Ireland, over the divorce, for instance, back when Ireland was a lot more Catholic than she's become. You keep throwing referenda at your population until you get the right answer on the same issue. You just keep throwing it at them. Eventually, you wear them down, you get the right answer, and then that's the sacred law of the land that can never be changed because it's the will of the people. Uh, Voting in and of itself is, I think, should be definitely linked to what you're actually putting in to the system for two reasons. You have universal suffrage, just a mob vote. Well, what does that mean? It means that the vote of someone who's, an illiterate streetwalker is the same as that, is worth the same as that of a veteran turned uh, scholar who not only has life experience but actually knows something or two about how things really work. And yet, universal suffrage means they have the same voice. I don't think that's right. Not at all. I think I'm in favor of a qualified suffrage. Now, what do I mean by qualified suffrage? Well, firstly, if you're not able to read or write, you shouldn't be able to vote right off the bat. I think that you should be a taxpayer if you vote on something that's going to require the expenditure of taxes. Particularly in our setup in California, uh, I think you really need to be a property owner if you're going to vote on bond issues, because that's connected to the land tax. Now, that's why whenever I vote on such issues, even if I agree with what the bond's being issued for, I vote against it. Because you know what? I don't own a home. I have no property. I have no business voting to raise taxes on other people's property when I'm not putting into it. If I did own a home, then I'd say, well, sure, then it's a question of whether or not I want a library. Am I willing to pay more to get a public library, say? And by the way, I would. If I were a homeowner, you bet I would vote for a library. Absolutely. But having said that, then, I think A, no illiterates should be allowed to vote. B, uh, your ability to vote should be based upon what you contribute to the system.
Um, okay, let me ask you a question I've been meaning to ask for a long time now.
All
Um,
right.
You keep touting that we've entered in a post-democratic age, right?
I
You
do.
keep saying that. But my question is, why is that an important distinction? And let me preface this with, um, you don't like democracy, and one
I
of the
wouldn't say I
principal.
don't. I wouldn't say I don't like it. I would say I don't believe it exists.
Okay, uh, you don't believe democracy exists, and you believe it's a smokescreen. It's a deception. Uh, because every society has the rulers and the ruled,
Yeah,
and democracies pretend that the voters rule when
yeah.
really there's an oligarchy that's controlling things. Is that correct?
Well,
Have I? Yeah.
yeah. Fair to say.
So, given that,
As in every culture that's ever lived.
so
The
given
question is whether it's an oligarchy or an aristocracy. Haha.
okay, so given that uh, modern democracy is what it is, um, why are you saying that it's post-democratic? I mean, because the oligarchy is still controlling. It's been as it's always been.
No,
So
it's
why the new label?
the new label because it's changed its tactics and it's taken off the mask. There's no more pretense that elections mean anything.
But the deception is still there, no?
It is, but it's far less believable. I mean, if you stop people now, before this past year, people would often say, "Well, I've got the right to vote. I've got freedom." Well, what the past year has demonstrated is no, you don't. You can vote all you like, you'll still do as you're told and like it. And it's in a way that's almost, you have to wonder if God doesn't have a tremendous sense of humor, in the sense that basic stuff we're not allowed to do. We're just not allowed. And we don't even dream of questioning it a lot of the time. I was amused by President Biden's declaration that if we're good, we may be allowed to gather in small groups on the 4th of July. That was great. That was just great. If we're good. So you would, before this past year, they would never have framed anything that way. But as I've also said, when they had us put on our masks, they took off theirs.
Okay. But
Our rulers, and we have because they graciously allow us to have it. And if they wish, they can take it away, as they have done.
we as voters have given them the right to protect us.
Yeah, okay, that's nice.
They're using science to make the best
They,
decision possible.
yeah, I think they blinded us with science. There's a song in there somewhere.
Nice reference. Okay, I'll give you that one.
Thank you. But no, I mean that's what they say. But again, having lived through a couple of pandemics in the past, this level of utter control and unquestioning obedience we've never seen before. It's amazing. Even during the great Spanish flu pandemic, you had certain restrictions. They didn't last a year. Lasted a couple of months. And the flu went on because nothing was really all that effective against it.
But the system hasn't changed. Haven't they done things within the framework of the system?
Well, yeah, it's much more controlling now.
They're much more controlling, but I mean
Yeah.
that was they still govern with our consent, though.
Do they? Do they indeed?
Right?
We'll see. We'll see if Governor Newsom gets recalled.
Well, I mean, his job, I think.
Yes. Yes.
The thing about Newsom is he could have been it's so easy to be controlling and manipulative if you're just have
That's
half a
stupid.
brain.
Yeah, but he was stupid. He's a
So
really stupid
so
guy.
I don't think that's proof that, oh, we're not going to take it anymore. Like,
No, if he weren't so stupid,
yeah.
it probably wouldn't have been. But he was very stupid. But see, here's the perfect confluence. Their power has come to what so far is apogee, at the same time that their brain power has reached its nadir. I mean, look at bloody Justine Trudeau. I can't help us all. They have the maximum amount of power over us and the minimum amount of brains.
How did
It's a
that
perfect
happen?
storm. Well,
There's
it's
some sort of
probably
mathematical, like, social formula in there. It's like, well, okay, we've reached that level.
we're at this point, yeah, where we're completely controlled by doddering idiots. Yeah, it's great. It might be, as I say, God has a sense of humor and thought, well, okay, kids, you want to be run by scum? You get what you want. Because don't forget, we're the same people who, for 50 years, in the United States anyway, longer elsewhere, shorter elsewhere, uh, we've tolerated the mass murder of millions of infants. So why shouldn't we be ruled by moronic scum? We're, the hands are red. What's wrong with that? I mean, you didn't really think we were going to get away with it, did you? It doesn't work that way. There had to be a payback of some kind. And I suppose this is it.
Okay, this ties nicely into our next question from Joshua. Final question of the for today.
Of the final question of the epilogue. I like that.
Saint Robert Bellarmine wrote that, quote, "In a commonwealth, all men are born naturally free. Consequently, the people themselves immediately, indirectly hold the political power so long as they have not transferred this power to some king or ruler." End quote. How is the modern concept of popular sovereignty different from the medieval understanding of popular sovereignty that Bellarmine and others wrote about? Is it merely that in the modern concept it is something perpetual, which in theory keeps the government in existence at every moment? For example, social contract theory. Whereas in the medieval understanding, it's something that exists only at the inception of an entirely new government before the people consent to the particular system of governance. I'm having a hard time drawing clear distinctions. And also, how do you reconcile this with the notion that authority is hierarchical and flows downward from God?
Well, firstly, you'd need to read more Bellarmine to know about the latter part, because he writes very extensively about monarchy and authority from God. So you don't want to run away with only a single quote from Bellarmine. He wrote a lot more stuff than that. Secondly, the whole point of God is what the difference is. The medieval never saw anything separate from God. The people have no authority at all save what they get as creations of God, as ensouled creations of God. That's why hierarchy was part and parcel of everything they did. As I say, if you take the little piece of Bellarmine you've got there, it sounds very much like social contract theory. But you've got to read a lot more Bellarmine and you'll see it in context. Can't take it out by itself that way. The whole point of the social contract is that it's made by men among themselves without reference to God, without reference to the faith. And that right there is a world of difference. See, the interesting thing is that for the medieval mind, the individual was not sovereign. He was the subject of God. He could not do or think or be whatever he wanted to be. Now, of course, we've reached the height of individual sovereignty and that we can determine our own gender or invent new ones. We can yap about our truth my truth, as Princess Megan would say. But at the same time, we're so completely controlled that we have to wear our masks and can't do anything we're not allowed to do by daddy or mommy. So, a world of difference. But read more Bellarmine. Especially, Tumblr House has.
What do we have? We have a bunch of Bellarmine. I think we have a bunch of books from Mediatrix Press that publishes Bellarmine on the Roman Pontiff, I believe.
Yep.
Let me see. Autobiography of Saint Robert Bellarmine. Oh, Hell and Its Torments. You actually read that. We have we have that on the Tumblr House channel. It's one of our oldest videos, actually. Is Charles reading Saint Robert Bellarmine's Hell and Its Torments, which is actually a splash of cold water on your face, to be honest.
How old? When did I do that? That was a couple days ago.
Just a moment ago. I believe you did that in the 90s.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, I had transcribed that from cassette tapes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me ask you, what would happen if they bought the Roman Pontiff, and which is where he really goes into monarchy and so forth, bought the Roman Pontiff and his autobiography? How much would that be?
Actually, the Roman Pontiff itself, on the Roman Pontiff, is $37.95.
Wow.
So that inherently is free shipping and handling. You get free shipping on that.
Act now while supplies last.
That's right.
Not an actor. Operator standing by.
Batteries not included.
Void were prohibited. Sorry, no CODs.
I'm just looking at the description for this, and Father Ripperger gave a blurb for this, which is I've actually never even seen before for a book. And Father Ripperger says Mr. Grant is able to retain the scholastic edge along with the accuracy of the translation while preserving a sense of the author's style. Because obviously, I don't think anyone else has translated St. Robert Bellarmine. This is not a reprint.
No.
I think he actually translated this.
He did. Ryan Grant is a really, really good guy.